I have been given the privilege of speaking on the topic of the Water of Baha'u'llah at one of the Baha'i centers next week. So I did my homework. I reviewed all the writings of Baha'u'llah, al-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and the Universal Justice that I could get my hands on with regard to this topic. And then I reviewed my non-Baha'i sources on this topic as well, the best I could, on the question of globalism, and wanted to see what I can come up with. But I have to admit that I could not really say anything except reading just one of the letters of Shoghi Effendi addressing this topic in The Promised Days Come, or in Water of Baha'u'llah. So I'm going to share with you just a couple of pages from the Water of Baha'u'llah, written in 1936. Unification of the whole of mankind is the hallmark of the stage which human society is now approaching. Unity of family, of tribe, of city-state, and nation have been successively attempted and fully established. World unity is the goal toward which a harassed humanity is striving. Nation building has come to an end. The anarchy inherent in state sovereignty is moving toward a climax. A world growing to maturity must abandon this fetish, recognize the oneness and wholeness of human relationships, and establish once for all the machinery that can best incarnate this fundamental principle of its life. Now, almost 65 years later, we still see the animosities among nations, and particularly within nations, in the form of civil war and the form of atrocities in different regions that we see, particularly in Africa and in the Middle East, and not in too far distant past in Europe, as well as Asia and South America. So the problem is still there, but there's that positive force that is leading us toward that unification. A new life, Baha'u'llah proclaims, is in this age stirring within all the peoples of the earth, and yet none hath discovered its cause or perceived its motive. O ye children of men, he thus addresses this generation. The fundamental purpose animating the faith of God and his religion is to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race. This is the straight path, the fixed and immovable foundation. Whatsoever is raised on this foundation, the changes and chances of the world can never impair its strengths, nor will the revolution of countless centuries undermine its structure. The well-being of mankind, he declares, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. So Baha'u'llah 150 years ago tells us that unless we understand each other and live together, become harmonized in our thoughts, in our spirit, and understand that we are children of the same God, and all religions come from the same source, and all nations in the eyes of God are really one, and one humanity, that ultimate peace and unity and prosperity and heaven on earth is not going to come to pass, but it will ultimately come to pass as humanity becomes harmonized in their thoughts. So powerful is the light of unity. This is further testimony that it can illumine the whole earth. The one true God, he knoweth all things, himself testifieth to the truth of these words. This goal excelleth every other goal, and this aspiration is the monarch of all aspirations. He who is your Lord, the all-merciful, And he moreover has written, cherisheth in his heart the desire of beholding the entire human race as one soul and one body. Haste ye to win your share of God's good grace and mercy in this day that eclipseth all other created days. The unity of the human race, as envisaged by Baha'u'llah, implies the establishment of a world commonwealth in which all nations, races, creeds and classes are closely and permanently united, in which the autonomy of its state members and the personal freedom and initiative of the individuals that compose them are definitely and completely safeguarded. This commonwealth must, as far as we can visualize it, consist of a world legislature whose members will, as the trustees of the whole of mankind, ultimately control the entire resources of all the component nations, and will enact such laws as shall be required to regulate the life, satisfy the needs, and adjust the relationships of all races and peoples. The world executive, backed by an international force, will carry out the decisions arrived at and apply the laws enacted by this world legislature, and will safeguard the organic unity of the whole Commonwealth. A world tribunal will adjudicate and deliver its compulsory and final verdict on all and any disputes that may arise between the various elements constituting this universal system. A mechanism of world intercommunication will be devised, embracing the whole planet, because this was a long time before internet. Freed from national hindrances and restrictions, and functioning with marvelous swiftness and perfect regularity. A world metropolis will act as the nerve center of a world civilization, the focus towards which the unifying force of life will converge, and from which its energizing influence will radiate. A world language will either be invented or chosen from among the existing languages, and will be taught in the schools of all the federated nations as an auxiliary language to their mother tongue. A world script, a world literature, a uniform and universal system of currency, of weight and measure, will simplify and facilitate intercourse and understanding among the nations and races of mankind. In such a world society, science and religion, the two most potent forces in human life, will be reconciled, will cooperate, and will harmoniously develop. The press will, under such a system, while giving full scope to the expression of the diversified views and convictions of mankind, cease to be mischievously manipulated by vested interests, whether private or public, and will be liberated from the influences of contending governments and peoples. The economic resources of the world will be organized, its sources of raw materials will be tapped and fully utilized, its markets will be coordinated and developed, and the distribution of its products will be equitably regulated. Rather than me saying any other word, the listener should go back and read the text itself, or listen to the passage that was just read several times, because he addresses the question of democracy, unity, harmony, independence of thought and opinions, and clashes of thoughts and opinions, and a world federation where it becomes harmonious through an executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Thank you for your attention. We are reviewing together the Water of Baha'u'llah, one of the writings of Shoghi Effendi in 1930s. He continues to say that in this world order, when it comes to pass, national rivalries, hatreds, and intrigues will cease, and racial animosity and prejudice will be replaced by racial amity, understanding and cooperation. The causes of religious strife will be permanently removed, economic barriers and restrictions will be completely abolished, and the inordinate distinction between classes will be obliterated. So solving the question of race and inequality is one of the important aspects of the Baha'i Faith. Destitution on the one hand and gross accumulation of ownership on the other will disappear. So Baha'i Faith does not approve of accumulating extreme wealth and then billions dying of hunger. Many studies show that basically 40% of the world population own virtually nothing, live on $2 or $1 a day, if they're lucky in that, and then over 1 billion people are virtually homeless, while less than 20% live in total affluence, and perhaps only 1% are truly well off and billionaires. So this extreme of wealth and poverty is not acceptable. The enormous energy dissipated and wasted on war, whether economic or political, will be consecrated to such ends as will extend the range of human inventions and technical development to the increase of productivity of mankind, to the extermination of disease, to the extension of scientific research, to the raising of the standard of physical health, to the sharpening and refinement of the human brain, to the exploitation of the unused and suspected resources of the planet, to the prolongation of human life, and to the furtherance of any other agency that can stimulate the intellectual, the moral, and the spiritual life of the entire human race. Presently, because of all the conflicts, $1 to $2 trillion a year is spent on means of destruction. What if the bulk of this money is spent for the progress of the humankind, to bring peace and harmony to humankind, to be spent on education, on healthcare, on housing, on creating equity and justice across the globe, on promoting true justice. The two forces of positive and negative forces, destructive and constructive forces, are working together. And the hope of the Baha'is is that it would culminate in the good overcoming evil and the light overcoming darkness in the years to come. A world federalist system ruling the whole earth and exercising unchallengeable authority over its unimaginably vast resources, blending and embodying the ideals of both the East and the West, liberated from the curse of war and its miseries, and bent on the exploitation of the available resource of energy on the surface of the planet, a system in which force is made the servant of justice. We are getting there. Whose life is sustained by its universal recognition of one God and by its allegiance to one common revelation. Such is the goal towards which humanity, impelled by the unifying forces of life, is moving. Ultimately, we understand that there is one God. We are all children of the same God. All religions come from the same source, and we need to all dedicate ourselves to the good of the human race, to service to the humankind. That will be the beginning of heaven on earth. And this is our ultimate destiny. So we are not only hopeful, we're confident that this will come to pass. That world federation, where there'll be love and harmony and unity among the human race. We are leading in that direction. Let me conclude by the most recent passage received from Universal Justice, dated March 21st, 2011, addressed to the Baha'is of Iran. I'll read 2 paragraphs from this. They said, the year just ended saw a continuation of the dire hardships, persecutions, and injustices that have been heaped upon you, the Baha'is of Iran. The chief perpetrators of this oppression are those whose hearts and souls have been possessed by the evil of ignorance and fanaticism, which has robbed them of benevolence and nobility. We are all essentially noble, but see what atrocities they have created. Raping people, putting innocent people in jail, persecuting them, torturing them, killing innocent people. They have become instruments of violence and cruelty to their fellow human beings, and have deprived their own souls of the grace of divine bestowals. Others among your compatriots recognize your innocence. In their hearts sincerely wish to treat you with justice, but in the prevailing militarized climate are impelled to carry out the instructions of their superiors, and thus become reluctant participants in this tyranny. And they conclude with this paragraph: the world is in turmoil, and the onrushing tide of change is proceeding with unparalleled force and speed. The age-old order of the world has been disrupted, and the profound transformations that have taken place at all levels of human relationships call for a fundamental reconsideration of every aspect of life. This applies equally to Iranian society. Consider how its people are resolutely striving to establish a progressive society and are ready to bear every manner of pain and calamity in pursuit of this objective. The season of Nowruz and the renewal of the world of nature are an invitation to reinvigorate the powers of the spirit and to re-examine matters of the heart and conscience. It is befitting that in this vernal season, this outward symbol of the spiritual springtime, in your meaningful conversations with your friends, neighbors, acquaintances, colleagues, and other like-minded souls, you explore together how better to contribute to the material and spiritual welfare of others, and to build a society in which the innate talents of every individual can flourish with regard to distinctions of class, creed, gender, or ethnicities. Ponder together the true purpose of the world of existence and the life of man. Consider the beauty and efficacy of a society founded on the principle of unity and diversity, and deliberate on that essential nobility of the soul that enables the individual to see his or her own happiness in the happiness of others. Leave the oppressors to God and call to mind the admonition of Baha'u'llah: O oppressors of the earth, withdraw your hands from tyranny, for I have pledged myself not to forgive any man's injustice. Look beyond the hardships that have encompassed you on every side, and fix your gaze on the sublime vision of the faith of God for the betterment of the world and the happiness of the nations. Following the models of the lives of the central figures of our faith and that of your spiritual forebears, persist in the noble example that you yourselves have set up over the last 30-some years, and remain patient and composed under difficulties. Persevere in your inspiring sacrifice, and do your share to build a world and an Iran that are united, prosperous, and free. Our prayers in the holy shrines are with every one of you. Signed, the Universal House of Justice. Hello. My understanding of the Water of Baha'u'llah comes primarily from these sources. So in the next segment I'll speak about Water of Baha'u'llah, but in this segment I just want to provide you with a bibliography and a short description. First and foremost is the document, the Proclamation of Baha'u'llah, which includes all his tablets to the kings and rulers and some ecclesiastics of the world, around which was pronounced around 1868 from Adrianople and some from Acre. In these documents he admonishes them against war, about war making, about conceit and corruption and tyranny, and shows them the path to peace, justice, harmony in the kingdom, and in their relation with their neighbors and with the whole world until total peace can come to pass. Next is tablets of Baha'u'llah, in particular tablet of Dunya, which gives a description for individuals, societies and government on how to end hostilities and usher in an era of peace, harmony and tranquility for the humankind. Next is a epistle to the son of the wolf that was written by Baha'u'llah toward the end of his earthly life, probably around 1891. Although addressed to a cruel clergy in Iran, it addresses some of the most important issues and teachings of the Baha'i Faith for peace, equality, tranquility, and prosperity of the humankind, including the importance of science, education, liberty, democracy, and justice, and praise for the role of honest journalists who can play an important role in exposing tyrannies and expediting global awareness of critical issues. Next is Abul Baha's important document, The Secret of Divine Civilization, which addresses the degradation of the Middle East due to mullahs' interference, despotism of the rulers and the need for rule of law, existence of just governments, and checks and balances between the executive and the legislative branch of the government. Next is Abul Baha's talks in the West, from European capitals to the cities all across US between 1911 and 1912, partly compiled in the book The Proclamation, the promulgation of the universal peace, in which he elaborates extensively on the prerequisites to bring about the lasting peace to a troubled world. Next is the book collection of letters from Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, called Water of Baha'u'llah, composed between 1929 and 1936, which focuses on the individual Baha'i's mission, the dark immediate horizon in the world, and the ultimate vision of the faith, and bring together the warring races, nations, and religions of the world, and usher in an age of peace, cooperation, and understanding for the good of humankind. Explaining in it how humanity is passing through his age of adolescence, he calls it, and will reach its maturity in due course of time. Next is the Guardian's Advent of Divine Justice, written in 1938, shortly before the beginning of World War II hostilities. He calls Baha'is to action and partnering with positive forces, and laments the dark horizon ahead of us, torn between the forces, the dark forces of racism, nationalism, and materialism. Next is the Promised Days Come, composed by Shoghi Effendi in 1941 during World War II. He once again reminds us of our grand mission and vision, culminating in fusion of religions, establishment of a world tribunal, legislator, and an executive branch promoting peace, justice, and commerce across the planet through a loose federation of states who would work in harmonizing issues and working for the good of humankind. Next is God Passes By, composed by Shoghi Effendi in 1944, exactly 100 years after the beginning of the Baha'i revelation. In this document, Shoghi Effendi provides a detailed analysis of the first century of the faith, and provides a detailed description of the administrative order of the Baha'i Faith, which is a preamble to what we call the world order of Baha'u'llah. And then beyond that, we come to the works of the Universal Justice that periodically assesses our progress toward achieving the goals of the World Order of Baha'u'llah. First, we see the statement of the promise of world peace addressed to the people of the world in 1985. That is a prescriptive document cautioning us against the dark side of racism, nationalism, materialism, and hoping that the higher side leading to peace, equity, and global security will prevail in the years to come. Second, Baha'i international community, under the auspices of Universal Justice, issued another statement after the UN conferences in 1992 on environment, 1994 on population, 1995 on social development. And right around the time of the next World Conference, UN World Conference on women. In this document, again, they emphasize the prerequisites to social justice and harmony in the world for the good of mankind. The next document, issued under the auspices of Universal Justice, is the Century of Light, which is a 100-year assessment of the progress of the faith, progress in the secular world, and also some of the most horrific wars and problems that we have had in the 20th century. The next document to be mentioned is called One Common Faith. It's the latest in a series of documents issued by the Universal Justice that simply concludes with this profound statement from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith: that which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its people in one universal cause, one common faith. Now, in addition to these authoritative works, I'd like to mention two books. One is a collection of questions and answers by Mr. Nakhjawani, a retired member of the Universal Justice, entitled Towards World Order, which elaborates on many important aspects of the World Order of Baha'u'llah. The other is a collection of articles on the Baha'i vision of world peace and world order, authored by several Baha'i scholars. In the next segment, I will briefly discuss the content of these important documents as briefly as possible. Thank you for your attention.